All right. Welcome back, everybody. Next session will be Mike Gomez talking about AA training and qualifications. So have at it, Mr. Gomez.
Copy, will do. Okay, Matt, is that up again?
Yep, it's up.
All right, cool. Afternoon, everybody. Mike Gomez, regional training specialist for the BIA Northwest region. I'm also a interagency training specialist for the Northwest area. I'm based out of the Redmond Training Center in Redmond. And so I know you guys have been through a lot this week. I think this has been a very busy week, so I'll just move through this thing and get going. But what I want to talk about in general is dealing with firefighter training and qualifications. And so there's a lot of information, kind of like the past presentations that you folks have been dealing with. Again, like everybody else, I don't want you all to get overwhelmed by what's going on. But again, just giving you some information as to what's out there regarding training and qualifications. So anyway, moving on. Some of the objectives that I want to talk about today are primarily identifying the policies and standard documents that we use regarding wildland and prescribed fire training, and some workforce development activities for fire and non-fire personnel. I need to describe the agency administrators and FMO's roles in wildland fire for not only, again, fire personnel, but also non-fire, which I tend to mention as militia. We're going to describe the policy requirements for training and qualifications of line officers and their designated actings. Do a little review on IFPM and FSFPM standards. Even though we're going to this new identifier and whatnot, we still have to deal with IFPM, FSPM, but like I said, we talk more about that. We're going to identify what a certifying official is in IQCS, which is also for the state folks similar to what goes on in IQS. We're going to describe the benefits of a qualifications review committee and describe the process and purposes of conducting individual training audits. We all love that. So anyway, I'm going to talk about the policies and documents right now. What we normally do is we abide by the 310-1, which is the Wildland Fire Qualification System Guide. That guide is established by the NWCG, or National Wildfire Coordinating Group, and it identifies position qualified standards for training, experience, physical fitness, and currency for national mobilization. And these are the minimum standards that we all have agreed to and abide by. But we also have another supplement, which is called the Federal Wildland Qualification Supplement to the 310-1. Now, this one was developed primarily for federal agencies to use that, because if, as you'll see in your future positions or your positions right now, we had an identifier called technical specialist. And that was a broad scheme of positions and everything else. What I usually call a TNSP is kind of like it's like a carte blanche credit card. You could do anything with it and that type of thing. Getting folks out on the incident and everything, even though they didn't meet the minimum standard quals for what it states in the 310-1 and whatnot. And so to kind of help alleviate that problem, the federal agencies got together and established minimum standards for certain positions that were going out there and assisting us in wildland fire, just to kind of get a little bit away from the TNSP identifier. And so again, the federal agencies consolidated a lot of these positions. They didn't consolidate everything, but again, take a look at that. So depending on if an individual wants to reach a goal on a certain fire position and whatnot, if it's not stated in the 310-1, then the second option is to look in the supplement, because sometimes it's there. One of the things to take into consideration in this thing is that the 310-1 is updated each year. Usually it's updated and published in January of each year. The 310-1 supplement is usually updated and established every December. But again, depending on situations that are going on, sometimes it's posted, sometimes it's not. But again, just be wary that in the back of your mind, that's when the new standards are published. So things tend to change every year, not much, but every now and then. And that's kind of something to keep in mind. There's also some additional policy direction and pertaining to qualifications and training standards that each agency follows. I think that through this course, everybody has talked about the Red Book. There are also, like I said, information in there on certain quals that are needed, certain training standards that you can find in there. But then what we also do in the training world is we've got all these other uh, policies, guides, documents, and everything that we kind of have to review, depending on what position we are looking at. Some examples like I got here is basically the aviation operations guide, which talks about, which includes aerial ignition, interagency aerial supervision, rappel operations, and that type of thing. But there's numerous guides out there. And one of the things that if you, when this class is done, and I'll kind of stress it throughout this presentation, is try to meet up with your unit or your forest or your agency training officer or whatnot to help you out in trying to find out some of these answers regarding training and quals, because there's numerous documents out there that we really have to look at. And I can admit to you guys that I'm not a perfect one. A lot of times I get um, the training officers at the local or home units ask me a certain question that I didn't even foresee. So sometimes they'll catch things that we don't catch at the regional level. And so it's a matter of being transparent and finding those answers. Some other manuals and whatnot. We have, like I said, the Bureau agency manuals and handbooks that are out there. We also have a what's called PMS 901, which is a standards for course delivery. It used to be the old field manager's course guide. And what that guide did was identify the instructor qualifications that they folks needed to have in order to put on a NWCG course. Also assisted in timelines and whatnot in developing courses, getting them ready for presentation. And so that guide helped a lot of folks out, especially with the unit instructors and lead instructors. Excuse me. We also have the Interagency Fire Program Management, or IFPM, and the Forest Service Fire Program Management, which identifies certain training and qualification requirements for certain level positions, which I'll talk about later on through this slide presentation. For DOI, we have a all hazards position qualifications guide, which deals with all other hazards except for fire. And if for the DOI agencies, if you get any questions or comments between the 310-1 and the all hazards position guide, there, I think it's on the second page somewhere, that specifically states that those positions do not qualify for wildland fire because wildland fire has its separate requirements and everything else. So there is that division there. But for floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, whatever else, we can follow the DOI all hazard operations guide. Because I do get calls on that, and then I have to explain it's on page so and so, highlight it and here and there. So again, just something to be aware of. Now we're going to talk about agency administrator and fire management officer roles and responsibilities. So when it comes to prescribed fire qualifications, dealing with, like I said, not only fire personnel and militia, there are certain roles and responsibilities that you have as an agency administrator and an FMO. In the 310-1, the agency administrator identifier is AADM, but there is no identifier for FMO. So usually it's basically the highest fire qualifications that they have. But one note with that, with the Forest Service that occurred, I think 2 or 3 years ago, is they identified their AADMs now as Wildfire Agency Administrator, which is WFA. There are 3 levels, 1, 2, and 3. And then also Prescribed Fire Administrator. which is RXA, again, 1, 2, and 3. So they've kind of broken it out there a little bit more for folks to work their way up and that type of thing. So what I want to do now is if you guys can take about 7 minutes, I want you to just get in your groups and kind of talk about what do you think your roles and responsibilities are based on, if you're an FMO, what do you think your roles and responsibilities are? As an agency administrator, the same thing, and kind of discuss that because you guys are going to have to work with each other when you get back to your units and everything pertaining to a lot of this information. So I just kind of want you to take about 7 minutes and discuss those things, what you think they are. And there is no wrong answer, but again, just kind of get that flair for that. So um, what time should they be back, Matt?
Uh, well, it's 30. I got 136, so I didn't hear the first part of that question. Sorry.
7 minutes, 7 minutes. So 136.
Be 2 or 142.
142 works.
Okay. Or 43, I guess.
Okay, let's get rolling. So now that you've had your little discussions and everything, let's see if you come up with some of the things that I came up with in relate. You may have found some more things than I've got written down, but again, you guys as FMOs and agency administrators got a lot on your plate. And so let's see what we got. So some of the things that we want to look at for agency administrators and FMOs. Any personnel who respond to wildland fire, prescribed fire must meet the minimum standards in the 310-1. That's federal and state folks. Federal agencies can utilize the positions in the 310-1 supplement to help with those additional positions. There are certain firefighters that must meet standards identified in the IFPM qualifications or the FSFPM qualification standards and guides, which again, we'll talk a little bit more later. Agency standards for training and qualifications may exceed the minimum standards established by NWCG. Such additional standards will be approved by the fire directors and implemented through this incident qualifications and certification system. There is a unique tool and I know I'm jumping the gun a little bit, in IQCS that which we call as a troubleshooting menu that you can find an individual that's in there, and depending on which agency they work for, you can find out what qualifications and experience they need to meet at a certain position. And what training officers do with that is they use it a lot to kind of help determine, where those empty boxes are, where those empty slots are to get this individual qualified. And it's a very good tool. It's color coded, which if you got everything on there that's green, maybe the only thing that's listed in red is they need a task book. So again, that's kind of that avenue you got. But then again, there's other things that an individual may need a certain prerequisite experience or a required class to excel into that future position. So again, the IQCS tool is a pretty good tool to use. Some other things for agency administrators and FMOs is standards which may exceed the minimum standards established by NWCG are identified in, for the Forest Service, the FSFAQ. Again, this is also identified for the agency administrators in the prescribed fire and wildfire administrator positions and task books, which are identified in the 310-1 supplement. For the BLM, they have BLM standards for fire training and workforce development. For the Fish and Wildlife Service, they have their fire management handbook. And for the BIA, it's Branch of Wildland Fire Management website. So again, I guess I'll throw this commercial in there for folks is, if there's any questions for certain things or whatever, that's what the Pacific Northwest Training Center staff are there for, is we look at all these manuals, excuse me, and try to find that information for you. I think we got a, I don't know, 70-30 record on those types of things. But again, things are always changing. Sometimes things aren't changing, but just trying to find that information that you guys need That's kind of why we work with your training officers to kind of help them find an answer for you if there is an answer. Additionally, for agency administrators and whatnot, all agencies hold the line officers responsible for ensuring that their personnel are qualified according to agency standards. That role may be delegated in writing. Delegating this to a subordinate does not relieve the agency administrator from that responsibility. But then again, you need to check your agency policy for any particulars that are required by your agency that you work for. Some policy requirements for training and qualifications of line officers and their designated actings. A lot of this information can be found in the Red Book, but each one has certain standards for agency administrators. For the Forest Service, again, you got to do a agency certification program. Back in 2023 for the Forest Service, that was when they established these new position and task book requirements for wildland fire administrator and prescribed fire administrator. So again, to get from I think it's type 3, type 2, and type 1, depending on the complexity and whatnot, those task books are there for your training officers to do. And then the process is that the task books will be reviewed by the forest training officer, then sent directly to the geographic training representative, which is what we call a gator, and that's Chris Burig. From there, she will then forward that information, if everything looks correct, to the regional line officers team to kind of review and approve, or send it back with needing more clarification or whatever the situation may be. The certifying official for these task books is now the Deputy Regional Forester that must sign off as a certifying official, which again, we'll talk a little bit more as we progress. No Fire Qualification Red Card Committee is needs to deal with this with those RXA and WFA, but everything else they need to do that review any other operational support positions and that type of thing must go through a Red Card Committee. One of the things to note is that adding quals mid-season is very problematic because we're all out there supporting fire, including your training officers. And so trying to add quals, do certain things, whatever, will take some time during the summer months. Like I said, your training officer could be out on a fire assignment, may not have time. Your certifying official or your FMO could be out there and there's nobody there to really sign off on the red card. So it'll take a little bit more time to get that updated red card signed off and approved. It is possible, but again, we can't do it overnight. So I just wanted to make that clarified regarding, and so that way you're aware of it. This is a schematic kind of what was developed in 23 pertaining to the process for WFA and RXA positions and whatnot. It's just kind of a roundabout that one of my coworkers developed, just to kind of give you folks an idea of the process to get one of those task books issued, reviewed, and certified. For the BLM, agency administrators and their actings must complete fire training within 2 years of being appointed to a designated management position. For the Pacific Northwest, an AA checklist must be completed with all requirements, then sent to the state FMO for certification. For the Park Service, park superintendents who have potential wildland fire response in their park, their designated acting superintendents and supervisors of fire management officers attain and maintain agency administrator qualifications in the IQCS. The qualification must be attained within 2 years of appointment to the positions listed above. For the Fish and Wildlife Service, the project leader refuge manager is responsible for the safe and efficient implementation of fire management activities within their unit, including co-op activities with other agencies or landowners in accordance with delegations of authority. The project leader, refuge manager, or principal acting will meet the required elements outlined in the management performance requirements of fire operations. If an agency administrator is absent during the incident, the refuge supervisor or regional management coordinator will make an assessment of the acting agency administrator's capabilities and provide appropriate additional support. For the BIA, all Bureau agency administrators, line officers, including agency superintendents, foresters, natural resource managers, that could include tribal national resource managers, and regional foresters are required to attend 581. So for the BIA folks, yeah, if you have tribal natural resource managers and you think that this class would be beneficial for them, um, you know, try to persuade them to come to this class. It will help them learn what we have to do on the federal side in regards to dealing with large fire incidents. IFPM, the Interagency Fire Program Management. So back in '94, when we had the South Canyon incident, a federal wildland fire policy review directed federal entities to establish certain qualification standards for our firefighters to improve safety and increase professionalism in fire management. So IFPM was developed and implemented back then. The other caveat to that was the Forest Service also created something similar off of IFPM, which was identified as FSFPM. Now, it identified position complexities, minimum qualification standards, and training. And so what I have for you here is just kind of, I got this from the Forest Service dealing with their FSFPM, but again, it works with the IFPM, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what those requirements are. As you can see for the Unit Fire Program Manager, you have the three complexities: low, moderate, and high. The recommended GS grades and series, and then this and whatnot. But what's important is the selective placement factors. As you can see here, there are two pathways for the high and the moderate. And we'll look at the high primarily. As you can see, the first pathway is they must be qualified, currency not required, but qualified as a division at one time, and also an IC Type 3 or an ARC-SP 2. The second pathway deals with aviation. So if they came up in the aviation world, they needed to be qualified, again, currency not required, as an ASGS and an IC Type 3. But you can also see the additional required training is this course, which is M581. One of the other things that if you get those qualifications and whatnot, if memory serves me right, you had to have a minimum of 90 days of suppression time to be included. And so that kind of helps, again, in that learning mode to see, having an understanding that our FMOs or our fire program managers have that knowledge and experience of fire. Some of the key IFPM positions that were identified back then were hotshot superintendents, helicopter managers, senior firefighters, engine module supervisors, supervisory engine operator, FOSs, and prescribed fire and fuel specialists. Dispatch center managers are also identified in here. Lead initial attack lead dispatchers and assistant center managers. Unit, geographic, and national fire program managers were also identified in this. So again, this is kind of what we were dealing with. How it relates to the 456 series, I have no idea. But again, I haven't seen any direction or guidance to shy away from IFPM or FSFPM. So we still have to look at those standards to kind of see what's going on. But again, depending on your agency, you just kind of follow those protocols and direction and guidance. Oops. Things to consider. And these were some of the things when folks are being hired through IFPM and FSFPM. Again, things to consider, things like is one is, have your recruitment hiring efforts been affected or challenged in that in what way? IFPM standards identified, minimum educational backgrounds or educational degrees and that type of thing. So did it hinder trying to hire personnel because of that situation? And I know when this was first developed a long time ago, a lot of well-qualified, knowledgeable individuals came up through the experience ladder and not the education ladder. So again, did that cause some problems hiring and recruiting folks? Again, like it says in the third bullet, has the qualifying education required experience had an impact on successional planning for yourself and your employees? And then if you had an employee, if an employee had questions regarding IFPM, FSPM, who would your local contact be to reference these materials and available? Back in the day when this thing first started, I was identified as that person. But in the past few years, I haven't been given that um, responsibility anymore. So it's kind of a hit and miss on my side too. I can tell you what happened historically, but up to date, it's going to be hard to find. I'll have to be like you guys, just have to Google it and see what I can find online. Qualification review committees. Again, comes right out of the red book, is that each unit with fire management responsibilities will establish incident qualification card committees, the certification process. Um, in areas cooperating with other federal and state local agencies, an interagency qualification certification committee should be established and include representatives from each unit. So again, if you have neighbors and whatnot and other functions, that red card committee doesn't have to be specific to um, Forest Service, BLM, BIA. If you have other agency partners, yeah, go ahead and invite them and stuff. For agency administrators, I know your schedules are busy with a lot of things you're doing, but if you have an opportunity to sit in on a red card committee to see how your folks operate and look at people's training and qualifications, it would be a good venture for you to just kind of take time to go and just sit in for an hour or two. Sometimes the qualification process takes a couple hours or 3 hours. Um, these committees do provide management oversight and review for all the positions in their jurisdiction. The reason these committees were also set up is that it goes away from one person making the sole decision to qualify an individual or to say the person's not qualified and that type of thing. So this committee really supports that because there's a lot of discussion going on in qualifying individuals. They're supporting the agency administrator in kind of doing this for that, because we can tend to go through a lot of folks. The committee determines whether, like I said, each employee possesses the personal characteristics necessary to perform wildland prescribed fire positions. This committee can also, like I said, if there's concerns or they need to, even though the individual has a completed task book, they may want the individual to go out for a couple more assignments just to get more of that experience underneath their belt before they certify that position. So again, they're always making recommendations. They're making recommendations to the agency administrator so that they're keeping the AA informed of what's going on and whatnot. So that way everybody is in the loop on individuals and their quals. The committee develops interagency training needs and sponsors courses that can be offered locally, and then ensures training nominees meet the minimum requirements for attending courses. I think all of you, mostly on the fire side, are familiar that when we put on an NWCG course, it does identify minimum student requirements for attending or being available for that course. Example that I use out in the field sometimes with folks is you don't want to sign somebody up for S490 when they haven't had S390. So again, you don't want to jeopardize that individual in not passing the class. So you want to make sure that they meet not only the minimum training requirements, but also the minimum experience requirements to get to that level. Sure, there's some leeway in there, but again, it's kind of up to the fire program and whatnot to kind of see what they want to do with individuals. The IQCS system. It's an interagency information system that tracks responder qualifications for federal partners of NWCG. IQCS is the required database for agency employees. So the certifying official. The certifying official is the agency official at the responder's home unit who is responsible for authorizing and granting position certification per agency policy. The agency official is responsible for completing agency certification block on the front cover of the position task book. If you want to know more about the position task books, like I said, talk to your training officers and they'll be more than happy to explain that whole process. For the state agencies use something similar, which is called IQS. It is a relatively comparable
Mike, you muted yourself accidentally.
How did I do that? Anyway, sorry I did that. But again, the IQCS system is a similar data program, similar to IQCS. And I'd say very similar, but the state agencies decided to go that route. And so we have those two programs. When we try to transfer individuals from IQS to IQCS, there is a process and whatnot. So it works relatively well. One of the things I must mention about IQCS is in the fall of this year, we will have IQCS 2.0. What changes and everything are in there, I have no idea because I haven't seen anything yet. But one of the things that you need to make sure of is that your employees' profiles are up to date with the correct email address, with the correct business phone number, and that sort. One of the things that they relayed on the BIA side is that no individuals must have the same email address. Sometimes that's being done because of camp crews or whatever. Individuals may not have a personal email address. And so it's usually copied to one group, whatever email address. So now that's going away, that we're having to talk to all of our folks to say, hey, you got to have a personal email address, because by the time IQCS 2.0 comes out, that individual's qualifications and whatnot may not want to talk to IROC or anything else. So, difficulty in getting them dispatched. That's just a heads up. I don't think any of the other agencies have that issue, but if you do, it's good to double check to make sure that their profiles are up to date with their current information. Training and qualification audits. In Chapter 13 of the Red Book, it identifies standard for audits, and it states each agency will designate employees at national, regional, and state and local levels as fire qualification administrators. Those administrators primarily are your training officers because they have been given the delegation of authority to manage IQCS. If for agency administrators and FMOs, if you just got into the job, a new job in that position for wherever you're located at, I would really recommend that you make sure that your training officer has a new delegation of authority. So that way everything is in sync and whatnot, so that they can take care of the database for you. As it states here, all records must be updated annually and modified as changes occur. Each district, forest, region, state, and department may have different processes, but the end state is the same. We need to ensure that red card employees have the documentation to prove that he or she is qualified for the positions that are printed on his or her red card. Now, the Forest Service has mandated the process that certificates and everything must be uploaded into IQCS for the individual's required training, task books that are completed, and that type of thing. For the interior agencies, we haven't been given that requirement, but again, it's not a bad idea to keep working towards that. So if your training officers have time this time of year, which is a little bit slow for them, and they have time to upload all that information, then give them the time to do that, because it is a long process. And if you don't believe me, you can talk to Sally or any of your training officers, and they go, yeah, it's a long process. It takes time. It's time consuming. I guess I should say. So with that, again, just reviewing some of the objectives. We had talked about the fire training and workforce development activities. We described the agency administrator and FMO's roles, and then certain policy requirements remaining for training and qualifications for line officers and their designates. We did a little review on IFPM and FSFPM, described the qualifications review committee, identified what a certifying official means in IQCS, and then the process for purposes for conducting audits. I know I went fast, but it's been a long day. Any questions that I can help answer? Or Sally? Or Matt? I think Matt's in the class too.
Anyone have any questions for Mike? Gosh, hearing none.
Almost at the end of the day, so we're getting close.
Almost. Well, you got us back on clock too, so that's awesome.
Oh,
So I
cool.
really appreciate that. We're gonna go into a break. So back at 20 after.